Alright, I always talk to you guys and girls about the importance of a proper dynamic warm-up. So I'm going to take you through a dynamic warm-up you can do before any session or any match to get yourself ready to perform your best. So as you saw, just a couple quick jogs, and then arms across the body, and then arms above the body to warm up the upper body, then some forward circles to warm up the shoulders as well as the upper back. And then as you're doing those circles, you're just doing a little skip, which is going to really help warm up your tendons, your ligaments, and your joints. Then you just get into a bit of a longer skip, followed by some backwards hip swivels, some hip shuffles. So basically how you do this, as you're moving backwards, you're just twisting your hip and slightly twisting your upper body to open up those hips. Then you're getting into a side shuffle, a high side shuffle with some arm swings to open up the groin, the adductors, as well as the upper back and the shoulders. And then we get into a bit more higher tempo work, just some high knees, trying to get your knees as high as you can, coordinating the arms with the legs, trying to remain on the balls of your feet the entire time. Then you're going into some butt kicks to warm up the hamstrings as well as the quads, the front part of the leg. And then we just get into a nice backwards long stride jog. Really good to open up the hips, the hamstrings, the glutes, as well as activate the knees. Then we get into a hamstring sweep. Excellent, obviously, to get the hamstrings going. Really get a nice dynamic stretch here. As you see, I want you to do a hinge backwards as if you were to do a deadlift. So you're dropping your butt backwards and sweeping the grass, opening up the hamstring. Then naturally after that, we go into some more dynamic work, specifically for the hamstring. But this also opens up the hip flexors, the groins, the entire leg. And then directly back into that longer jog backwards, and then we go into some lunges, coordinating opposite arm, opposite leg. This is excellent to open up the anterior chain, the front part of the body, specifically the hip flexor, the lat, the whole side part of the body, the obliques, and obviously, like I said, it stretches that back hip flexor and activates the glutes. So overall, excellent movement. Then directly into a backwards lunge with a twist over the standing leg. So all you're doing is lunging backwards, twisting over the standing leg. This will also open up the upper back, the lower back, as well as activate the glute when you're doing the lunge. Then we move into some knee hugs. So this is going to activate the opposite glute, as you see, trying to get a little bit on your tiptoes. This is going to stretch out the hip flexor, obviously, as well as the groin region. And then we're going to get into some forward shuffles, just some more dynamic stuff to open up the groin. Moving into some quad pulls. Obviously, as the name sounds, you're warming up the quad, getting a nice dynamic stretch for the quad, which is obviously very taxed through football sessions. Then we're going to get into a karaoke. Very, very good movement if you do it correctly for the hips as well as the upper body and the coordination of the upper and the lower body. Then we move on to some open the gates. Very, very good for the hip rotators as well as the entire hip region. Also works on your coordination. So you're basically just envisioning a hurdle and opening up over it. And then naturally we go into some close the gates. Also good for the hip flexors, the groin to close that off. And then we go into some backwards open the gates. Same exact thing, more range of motion, working as well on the lower back as well as the entire hip rotator region. Then just the 60% jog. And then we're going more into a dynamic work. So this is coordinated, really going to work on the hips in a coordinated fashion. Then we get into some lateral lunges. Very, very good for the groin. Obviously, the entire adductor region, as well as activating that opposite glute. So you can either do what I'm doing here. I was being a little lazy, I think. Hands on the legs. Usually I have my hands out in front of me. This is when I was just coming back from a long time out. So I don't think I was my fittest here. But yeah, you could do it this way as well. But usually I do it with hands in front. Then just some back kicks. Obviously opening up the hip flexor here, as well as the entire part of the hip and the groin. Same exact thing, side kicks, more into the groin region here. Be careful if you don't have good groin mobility. I would start with more of a bent leg. Don't go fully straight leg. You got to be the judge. Then back into another backwards jog. And then some kicks across the body. Excellent to open up the back. Really, really coordinate the upper and the lower body and the hip region. Then we got a band and we got into a bit of a glute and hip activation work. This is very, very important to make sure you're fully ticking and ready to go. This will really activate the hip flexors, the glutes, and the entire leg. So we just did some forward and backwards walks, coordinating, and then we're just doing some side to side walks. So the opposite here is you're taking a step to the side and the other leg is following. In the previous walk, we did it as the legs were far apart, but now we're letting the legs come together. They don't need to necessarily touch, but come close. Then we get into some lateral work. Obviously very good for cutting. This really activates the glute medius specifically, one of the strongest and most overlooked muscles in the body of any athlete. Once you get this going, the whole body really works better. So then we're just getting into some stationary stuff. So standing in one place and just going right foot in, right foot out. This obviously activates the glute medius like I was talking about, as well as activates the brain with proper coordination. Then we just got into some landing prep. This is very, very important and crucial for the health of the knee and the health of the ankles. So then we worked on some hip rotations. This is very, very good to open up the hips. As you saw, I started very slowly. As soon as I got warm, I try to go as fast as I can. Then we advanced the drop sticks. So we go 2 to 1. So you're getting onto your tippy toes and you're landing on one leg. Like I said, very, very good to prepare yourself for any landing situation. Then we got into some 2-footed jumps on the tippy toes. So jumping and then landing again on the tippy toes softly and nicely, absorbing the landing. And then we just got into some tall leaning forward broad jumps. So getting onto the tippy toes, dropping that butt back, and really trying to drive forward with your hips. Then we got into some lateral bounds, specifically focusing on the landing each and every time. Very, very important for the knee health as well. And then we're finishing off with some forward pillar skips. This is excellent to work on your running technique. And then we try to get even more bouncy. As I always say, remain on the balls of your feet, the tippy toes of your feet to remain bouncy, and try not to let those heels touch. Then we got into a sideways pillar skip, also very good for lateral change of direction. And then we just finished off with a nice quick side shuffle. Hope you enjoy.